friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Katey Flowers and today we're going to do a bit of a fun video. We're going to talk about all of the decks that I almost bought, considered buying in 2021, but didn't. So this is not a video where I'm going to hate on a bunch of decks that just are clearly not for me. Instead, these are all decks that some of them I came so close to buying. Some of them I was like in checkout, you know, but something held me back. I have a lot of decks and these are just the ones that I clearly remember like thinking about buying. So I'm sure there's others. Some of them were released this year, many were not, but that's enough explaining. Let's dive right in. So the first one is the Tarot of a Moon Garden. Honestly, this is a deck I go back and forth on all the time and probably always will because it was my very first tarot deck ever and I no longer own it. When I was about 15, I found this deck in a little smoking paraphernalia shop in Stockland at Townsville, where my friend used to work. And I went in there and they just had one deck, the Tarot of the Moon Garden. And for some reason, I could not stop thinking about it. So I saved up my little Subway wage and I bought the deck. I was absolutely obsessed with it for a few months, but honestly, I have no idea what happened to that original copy. And then I did actually get my hands on this deck again about 6 years ago. And at first I was really excited, but the printing quality on that deck is awful. The lines and stuff, it almost looks like a really bad 3D image when you're not wearing glasses, the 3D glasses, if that makes sense. Like the lines and the colors are sort of printed. I don't know. It honestly makes me dizzy looking at it. Not all of the cards are like that from memory, but enough are. And so in the end, I passed that copy on. But every now and then when I see it online or I see it in a shop, like a little part of me is like, you know, the nostalgia thing, and I just and I very nearly did buy it this year, partly because Kelly Bear did an unboxing of it, and then I was also finishing up at the TS where we had a copy and I knew I would no longer have my staff discount, so I was very tempted. But in the end, I just kept remembering that awful print quality, and I don't think that's something that they've changed. So I don't know, I don't want to get a headache every time I look at a tarot deck, you know? The Tarot for All Ages. Now, this is a deck we got in at the TS and I just really liked the little box. I really liked the colors, like the cards that I could see on the box looked really sweet. It looked like it was quite simple, approachable artwork, but I really liked the art style and the color palette. Not to mention it seemed like pretty good value. It was a fairly affordable deck. And I'm sure I would be quite happy with a deck like that, but I think I was just really craving something sweet and gentle because, you know, of the constant lockdowns we went through here in Melbourne. I was feeling very overwhelmed and stressed. And a sweet, affirming, gentle kind of deck was, I think, something I was craving. But then the creators of the Thorne Tarot sent me their deck for review. The Thorne Tarot is also a deck for children. It has a very different art style. The Thorne is very animal-centric, whereas the Tarot for All Ages is not. And the Tarot for All Ages, I think, is intended for children, but to be useful for everyone, whereas the Thorne feels a little bit more specifically for children, but anyone can use it, if that makes sense. I guess at the end of the day, I sort of got my sweet, gentle, affirming, simple little deck fix through the Thorne Tarot, so I didn't really need another one. The True Heart Intuitive Tarot. This was a deck I was so looking forward to. It was one of the few decks that I was like aware of before it was released. I'm not someone who really keeps up with like upcoming titles, but this one I was really keen for. The artwork just looked beautiful. I was so drawn to the imagery. But then it got released and people started talking about how terrible the cardstock was, and not just like, oh, it's not the best, but like it's the worst kind of cardstock. That did put me off, I have to be honest. I think that is a deck that I would still consider getting at some point if the circumstances were right, certainly if they reprinted it with different cardstock. Like, I haven't talked myself out of getting this deck completely. It was more just like the build up and the excitement sort of got deflated when we found out about how bad the production was. The deck for Wonder Walking. This Oracle deck is gorgeous. This is one of the decks that I've come like the closest to buying. I had it in cart. I was like going through checkout, and honestly, it was just the exchange rate mixed with the shipping, mixed with the fact that it is an Oracle, and I don't tend to use Oracles as much as I use Tarot, but that deck is just beautiful. And for those of you who've been around for a while, you will know that walking is one of my favorite things to do. Both just like physically, I enjoy it, like socially, I love going for walks with friends, but also like it is the most spiritual thing I can do. I love walking. So this deck just felt almost perfect for me in so many ways. But I guess I just wasn't 100% sure how I would incorporate it into my practice enough to justify that very, very high price tag once I factored in the shipping and the exchange rate. The Wandering Star Tarot. This honestly gives me Tarot of a Moon Garden vibes, just a little bit, and that's part of the reason I was originally attracted to it. On top of that, being published by Hay House, I think it is, it's very affordable, and we got it in at the shop, and I did consider it. And although I did like the look of it, I like the aesthetic, once I actually started looking at each and every card, I don't know, it fell a little bit flat for me, I think. There's so many similarities between the cards and also just the people represented. There's not a lot of variation between the depictions between each card. It just didn't, I don't know. It just fell a bit flat, I guess. So I decided to pass on that one in the end. The Moon Void Tarot. And specifically, I'm thinking of the 3rd edition, I think it is, the one that's come out in that gorgeous millennial pink. Julie from Peekaboo Rose did a video on it, and I was very attracted to that deck. I really like the minimalist art style. I really like the pink. I'm a sucker for millennial pink. And honestly, this is another one of those decks that I did really like. I, went and had a look about where I could pick it up, where I could purchase it, and it was just the cost. I am willing to spend that much on indie decks sometimes, but it just, I don't know, it has to be special. I have to be super excited about it. And I think here I really liked it, but I wasn't obsessed. And so I just felt like maybe my money would be better off spent elsewhere. This is a deck I can definitely see myself still picking up in a trade one day or something like that. It's not one I've crossed off my list. It's still in the back of my head, but yeah, just not one that I was so excited for that I wanted to pay a huge amount of money for. The Carlotide Tarot, maybe is what it's called. It's a very cute looking Thorne deck. I really like the art style. It's very fun. A little bit cutesy, but not too much. I don't know, there's just something very, very appealing about it. And on top of that, I do tend to like Thorne cardstock, and even though their decks aren't super easy to get like in a regular old shop in Australia, they are fairly easy to get fairly affordably online. What stopped me with this one? I don't know. I think maybe just the fact that I have so many other decks that don't have the same artwork, but I think, I don't know, something about them, I would still go to them over this deck. Like the fun, quirky, playful, colorful decks, I would probably just go to the Sakurai Beto or something. I'm not saying they're exactly the same or anything, but I don't know, something about the vibes. On top of that, and honestly, this could go for quite a number of decks in this list, but for this one, it just stood out so strongly. The lack of diversity. I don't know. I don't need another deck like that in my collection because there are so many decks, especially mass market decks on the market that have minimal to no diversity already represented in their decks. And I can be someone who impulse purchases. I already have a number of decks that aren't as representative as I would like them to be. So when I went through and had a look at those cards, I didn't want to intentionally bring that into my collection and just like add to the white skinniness of my collection, Now these next two I was sort of planning on purchasing together. That's the Apparition Tarot and the Vessel Oracle. They're made by the same creator from memory, and I don't know how long ago it was. It must have been a few months ago. The creator was having a sale on their website, and it was a pretty substantial sale from memory. And I remember seeing it on Instagram advertised, and I was like, sure, I think I'm keen. I've seen these decks over and over again, and I do quite like them. Maybe not enough to spend full price, but I'm curious, I'm intrigued, So on the day of the sale, I hopped on over to the website, I put the decks in my cart, but turns out they either didn't ship to Australia or the sale wasn't extended to customers outside of the US or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember the specifics, but basically, yeah, that changed my mind pretty quickly. That's no shade to the creator. Like, I understand there's a lot that goes into shipping internationally, but yeah, I didn't know that going in, and I was super excited to get myself a bargain because you all know I love a sale. And when it turned out that it wasn't available to me in Australia, I was a little bummed. The Guided Hands Tarot is one that I have been going back and forth on ever since it released, honestly. Honestly, it's the color palette. 90% of why I'm so attracted to that deck is the color palette. It just does something to me. I love it. And every time I'm over on Little Red Tarot having a bit of a browse, I usually end up putting that one in my cart. I rarely actually check out, but like I'm thinking, I'm dreaming, I'm window shopping, and that is one that I always pull off the hanger and dream about. And I honestly couldn't tell you exactly why I have never pulled the trigger on that one, other than maybe cost and maybe that I already have so many decks, like it is very much a want, not a need. That could go for any of these decks, but yeah, I think That's another one that I would happily get in a trade. The Practical Magic Tarot has a similar sort of color palette, collage-y feel to the guided hands. And at first I wasn't so sure about like the little keywords, the titles at the bottom, but I think it's just like, it's a really cool looking deck. I really, really like it. I think the guided hands and this kind of came out around the same time, or at least I became aware of them around the same time. And I think because they're both like colorful, bright, airy colors with a bit of collage art going on, I sort of felt like I needed to pick between the two, and I never could, so I just never got around to picking either of them. And honestly, once upon a time, I definitely was leaning more towards the guided hand. And I think in terms of the look of it, I still am more attracted to that one slightly. Just the colors, they get me. But there's something about the Practical Magic Tarot that I think I prefer the choices and the depictions a little bit more. So maybe I'm leaning a little more towards that one, so who knows, maybe I will pick it up one day. The Cosmic Slumber Tarot. This is a deck by Liminal 11 and it's a very, very fun looking deck. I love the color palette. It's very vibrant, there's a lot going on. And I think I was sort of planning on picking this one up when it came into the TS, when we got it in. But we never did. And I don't know if they're going to or what. I don't work there anymore, but I was sort of waiting for it to come into the shop so I could get it on staff discount. So I kind of did think I was going to get that one, and I just never really did. And now with a bit of space from the excitement of the original launch, of the original release, I'm honestly not sure if it's a deck that I do still really want. I would have to go back and have a look at some walkthroughs and flip-throughs to make that decision now, I think. Laughing Eye, Weeping Eye. This is another one of those decks that I've honestly been going back and forth on for years. This is probably the deck that I've been thinking about for the longest out of any of these. It's very basic, very minimalist, a little bit quirky. There's something about it that really appeals to me and has done for a while now. Similar to the Guided Hands and the Practical Magic Tarot, whenever I'm on Little Red, that one ends up in my basket. I just have never actually ended up checking out with it. The Oak, Ashen, Thorne Tarot. I know this is a hugely popular deck at the moment. People love this deck, and I have to admit, after I sort of really connected with the Orion's Tarot, which is the first tarot deck that is solely animal-based that I've managed to have a good working relationship with, part of me was sort of tempted to, you know, dip my toe a little bit further into the world of animal tarot decks. But I really had to sort of reel myself in, have a bit of a reality check about the fact that just because the Orion's Tarot has worked for me, which, by the way, is by an Australian creator and features a lot of Australian animals, does not mean I'm all of a sudden going to magically start clicking with every animal deck out there, especially the ones that heavily feature Northern Hemisphere or just like not Australian animals. So it is gorgeous. I was tempted. I understand why so many of you love it, but I really have to accept the fact that most animal decks are not for me. The Orion's Tarot is an exception to a rule, not the new rule. The Morning Calm Oracle. This is another one that I saw on Peekaboo Rose, Julie's channel. It is just gorgeous. And I think if I am in the market for an Oracle deck next year, it will be in the top 3, you know, of my list of things to consider. I think I am just a little bit more hesitant to purchase Oracle decks simply because I tend to use them a lot less than I do tarot. And I already have so many. So bringing in a new Oracle deck, I have to be very cautious and realistic about what I'm actually going to use. And even though it's gorgeous and I'm sure I would use it for a while, I'm not sure how much it would end up fitting into the rotation, considering how many decks I have and how little I tend to use the Oracle decks I already have, if that makes sense. The Slow Tarot. Now, some of you might already know the reason why I decided not to get this deck. When I first saw this deck, I was in awe. It is just stunning. And it was almost like I couldn't remember the last time I seen a deck so beautiful. You know what I mean? Like I was ready to hit buy. But being the diligent collector that I am, I went and checked out a flip through. We got to card number 15, the Devil, and I noped right the fuck out of there. I think that choice to have the only fat person included in a tarot deck to be the Devil and to be depicted in the way that that Devil card is just offensive. There's no other way I can put it. Like, tell me you hate fat people without telling me you hate fat people, you know? The Dreamtime Oracle. This is a deck I think I probably will get. I think this is the only one that's ahead of the Morning Calm Oracle as far as oracles and my wish list is concerned at the moment. It's by an Aboriginal artist. It looks beautiful. The keywords and affirmations look really interesting and effective, and yeah, I'm pretty much sold. I've just got to get around to ordering it. In fact, I think I put this on my birthday wish list back in September. I make wish lists for my friends and family for my birthday and for Christmas. And that one was on my wish list, but nobody picked it out for me. So I think I'm just gonna have to buy it for myself. The OK Tarot. Honestly, this is kind of like the even more basic version of the Moon Void Tarot. The very simplistic minimalist imagery mixed with that millennial pink. It did things to me. But this is another one that I just had to be realistic about. I don't read Marseille. I don't like to read Marseille. So why would I pick this deck up? I mean, it's not a traditional Marseille by any stretch, but you know, like the non-scenic pips, the non-illustrated pips, is something I don't tend to like. So yes, the aesthetic appeals to me, the minimalism, the pink, but that's about it. I don't think this deck is for me. Tarot by Caro. This deck is just really beautiful. It's just the artwork that does it for me. But at the end of the day, as beautiful as the art style and the aesthetic is, I don't know that I'm drawn to much else about that deck. Like, I didn't look at too many of the cards and think, oh, I love that depiction, I love that choice. It really was just the overall style that I was attracted to. And I already have so many beautiful decks that I do really love the depictions of, you know? So it just felt, I don't know. Honestly, I'm still tempted. It might happen and I might fall in love, but for now, I've managed to talk myself out of it. The Decolonized Tarot. Now, this one was seeking funding on Kickstarter this year, and I was so close to backing it. I think the project is definitely one worth supporting, and I think we as tarot readers, especially white tarot readers, should be trying to support more and more creators and tarot creators of color. On top of that, I really like the art style. It's stunning. The colors, the vibrancy, beautiful. So why didn't I back this deck? For two reasons. One, and it's the big one, is the fact that the deck is far from complete. The two people that are making the deck have only finished the artwork for the majors at the time of the Kickstarter anyway. And for me, that is a big, I don't know, cause for hesitation with backing Kickstarters. Not because I don't believe that the artists and the creator will, you know, fulfill their promise to the community. Although that has happened before, so it's worth taking into consideration. But for me, I felt like the minor arcana are such, obviously they're a huge part of the tarot deck and your experience as a tarot reader, and we didn't really get any sense of what the minor arcana were going to look like. Were they going to be more pippish? I think from memory they did say somewhere, maybe in their frequently asked questions, that they were planning on making it based on the Rider-Waite-Smith, but like, I don't know how based on the Rider-Waite-Smith that is. Is that just going to be a Rider-Waite-Smith clone as far as the minors are concerned? Or does that just mean they're going to be scenic pips, you know? Because I think it just wasn't very clear to me what direction they were going to go with the minor arcana, and that's very important to me. And secondly, they did not need my help. They far exceeded any goals that they had. If there was any risk of it not reaching its goal, I would have backed it. And that's why I sort of kept an eye on it. But once it was very clear that they were going to smash their goal, I don't know, I just felt like they didn't need my money right now in order to see the deck created and manifested. And then on top of that, my own personal hesitations. I would just like to see a little bit more of the artwork completed before I make my decision. And so there's a very real possibility that I will purchase this deck once it becomes available. I think it's a deck that I could really, really love and enjoy, especially because the artwork's so beautiful. I just didn't feel comfortable committing that amount of money given the stage of completion that they were at. And then turns out they didn't need me anyway. So I passed, at least for now. So those are all the decks that just came to mind yesterday morning when I was laying in bed and I came up with this video idea. I'm sure there are plenty more that I considered or that I spent time watching unboxings and flip throughs of, that I, you know, went out to see where I could purchase from. I'm sure there are many, many more, but these are the ones that at least have sort of stuck with me, that I must have spent quite a bit of time considering, I think. And a handful of these, like I've said, I'm also kind of still considering. But this is a good rundown, I think, of the decks that I very seriously considered but did not purchase in 2021. I would love to hear about some of the decks that you were tempted by, that you nearly purchased in 2021 but talked yourself out of or changed your mind about. Let me know in the comments below. I always love talking to you, especially about tarot decks. And of course, I have to say a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, especially my high tier patrons, Livia, Lynette Brown, Laurie, and Ian Yitzhak, for their very generous support of me and my channel. But I think that's enough gas bagging for now. So thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the comments below and in the next video. And until then, so much love. Bye.